Essentially I'm more of a historian than a numismatist. I'm here to tell stories about history and sort of teach about these objects and their relationship to history. I've been in the business full-time for 25 years, and I've spent that whole time in one way or another with the Stack's-Bowers family. There are lots of coins that people love that are rare and valuable that, to my mind, are incredibly boring. One year I wrote over 1 million words. Morning, my name is John Kraljevich. I am the director of Numismatic Americana for Stack's-Bowers Galleries, and we're based in Costa Mesa, California, New York City, and have offices all over the globe, from Copenhagen to Hong Kong to Vancouver.
Where are we? What are we doing?
We're in Atlanta. We're at the A&A National Money Show, which is one of the 2 American Numismatic Association conventions that are held every year. We haven't been to Atlanta in about 5 years, so it's nice to be back here. It's nice to be, back in this region. Not a lot of shows around here, but Atlanta's a big market. There's a lot of collectors here, so we're visiting with retail customers here and doing wholesale business with dealers, taking consignments, showing auction lots, buying and selling, doing all the stuff we usually do at a coin show.
What's your experience so far at this show?
It's good. People always like the show. I mean, it's easy to get to. The hotel's connected to the convention center. Atlanta's a good food town, so we're all pretty comfortable here, working here, and see a lot of familiar faces when we're here.
What is your favorite show to go to throughout the year? Like, how many shows do you go to, and which one is your favorite?
Sure. I do 6 to 8 shows a year, something like that. My best shows tend to be the big summer A&A show, wherever in the country it may be. And then the November Baltimore show. Baltimore is always a good town for the stuff I do, which is historical metals, colonial coins, things of that nature, things with a sort of bent towards American history. And the November Baltimore show in particular happens to be a show that's co-sponsored by the Colonial Coin Collectors Club. So all the people that are into colonial coins and early American metals, they all show up there.
Talk a little bit about what you brought, what Stack's-Bowers brought to this show.
Sure. So like any show, we have normal inventory that we buy and sell, but we also brought some really great auction highlights. So what I'm sitting in front of here are some highlights coming up from the offering of the Richard August collection. This is some of the highlights related to U.S. coins, and particularly early American historical metals, which are one of Mr. August's prime collecting interests going back to the 50s. He was an active collector since then, passed away last year. He was considered an expert in the field of early American metals, colonial coins, and colonial paper money. And some of the highlights that we have here include things like a silver Libertas Americana medal, which is generally considered the most important and most beautiful of all the early American metals. Silver is much, much rarer than a copper specimen, and this is a very nicely toned AU58 Plus by PCGS. So a high-end piece that's been off the market for decades. And you see in the case some other very, very rare early American metals, some of which depict George Washington. There's metals that depict Benjamin Franklin. There's a medal here that was given out to a Native American in Pennsylvania in 1757 or 1758. So lots of stuff for people that are very into early American history, particularly metals related to the Revolutionary War.
What's your favorite piece in the collection that you've brought so far?
Of the stuff in front of me, it would be hard for me to like something more than the most worn out piece here. And that's a piece that was struck in Philadelphia in 1757. It was struck on top of a Spanish pillar dollar. It's one of the 2 earliest metals struck in America that were struck about the same time. And that piece was struck by a group of Quaker merchants in Philadelphia called the Friendly Association. And they wanted to basically do business with Native Americans, buy and sell, but during the French and Indian War that was tough. There was hostilities, there was a lot of ill feeling, so this Quaker group basically had a treaty and struck this metal to let their Indian trading partners know that they were still friendly and still wanted to do business. So it's a very rare piece when you see them like this with that kind of wear on it and that kind of hole in it and struck on a pillar dollar. We know, first of all, that it's an original from the 1750s, and second of all, that was worn for years and years and years by a Native American who was living in colonial Pennsylvania.
Wow.
So a lot of great history.
That's incredible. Yeah, no, that's a good one to pick for your favorite one.
Yeah, for sure.
Do you personally like gold or silver coins better?
I wouldn't say I have a favorite. What's always motivated me has been history, so I like coins to tell a story. Essentially I'm more of a historian than a numismatist. I'm here to tell stories about history and sort of teach about these objects and their relationship to history. And I do that at shows, I do that in my writing, and so for me, if it's got a good historical story, I like it, whether it's gold, silver, copper, or something else.
Yeah, so is that sort of how you got into coin collecting, was the history behind it?
Pretty much, yeah, that's exactly. I've been doing this since I was a kid. I've been in the business full-time for 25 years, and I've spent that whole time in one way or another with the Stack's-Bowers family.
Wow, so you've been with Stack's-Bowers the whole time?
Yeah, well, I started my own business, so I had my own business for 17 years. They just rehired me back and made me an offer I couldn't refuse, so I'm back full-time.
Okay.
But even during that 17-year span, I was still writing sales and consulting and doing all that kind of stuff. So I've always been on the team with Stack's-Bowers.
So you might be a good person to ask this question. Is there an aspect of coin collecting and numismatics that you feel like is overshadowed that more people should pay attention to?
I mean, all the stuff that has great historical stories, you know? There are lots of coins that people love that are rare and valuable that, to my mind, are incredibly boring.
Okay. Do you have an example?
No, I don't want to offend anybody.
Okay.
But I mean, let's put it this way. You know, a random walk in Liberty half doesn't have a whole lot of history. They're pretty, they're neat. If you're doing a set, you need all of them, etc. But for me, I would rather have something that is sort of a relic or transports you to some other time that has some great story that talks about a history either that everybody knows and appreciates or something obscure that you're really not going to learn about any other way.
Yeah.
You know, and you can get a great historical story with a medal that's worth $100,000, but you can also do it with a coin that's worth 5 or 10 or 20.
Yeah.
So there's really no impact on value. There's historical things at every price level, and that means everyone can participate.
Gotcha. Do you have a specific coin in your collection that's like your favorite?
Oh God, I collect a lot of stuff, man. A specific coin that's my favorite. So I've got a Washington medal that was struck in Philadelphia in 1792, so when they were striking the patterns for the U.S. Mint, and this was struck by a guy who wanted to work at the first U.S. Mint. And this particular Washington medal is struck on top of a counterfeit Spanish 8 real.
Okay.
So we know that the coin it was struck on top of, that was a counterfeit, was circulating in Philadelphia in 1792. So that's
probably wouldn't have even known.
Yeah, probably not. But that's interesting to me because I think circulating counterfeits are interesting. In other words, ones that were made for trade, not to fool numismatists or coin collectors, but things made to spend. And it's interesting to know that that was in Philadelphia at that time, just as it's interesting that the thing struck on top of it is a very rare and valuable metal struck in the earliest days of the competition to get jobs at the U.S. Mint.
That's super cool.
Yeah.
Do you have like a holy grail coin on your bucket list? Like something you really either want to see or you really want to own?
At this point, I've seen everything, man. I've been doing this for a long time. I mean, it's been my full-time job for 25 years. So there's not much I haven't seen at this point.
Especially working for Stax Barrett.
You get to see everything. Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Is there any like highlight collection that you've been able to work on?
The Brent Pogue collection, the most valuable coin collection ever sold at auction. I cataloged that. So.
Okay, tell me a little bit about that.
Well, we got $180 million for it. It was all U.S. coins, mostly early coins from the first mint, so before 1836 primarily, and it was all the best of everything. $1804 in high grade, $1822 $5 gold piece in high grade, you know, 1794 cents, dollars, 796 half dollars. I mean, all the classic rarities from early America from the first mint in absolutely top echelon condition. So a collection like that probably will never be formed again. And it was a treat to be able to be the guy that brought it to auction and wrote it all up.
Yeah. What's the process like for categorizing an auction like that?
I mean, that took me years. That took me literally years. Wow. You know, I mean, we start with the coins, and obviously we get them graded, and then from there it's a matter of writing them up, and that's telling the historical story of the object as a useful item. In other words, as a coin when it was in its living form as a coin. And then telling the history of the object as a numismatic item. So talking about the provenance and researching that provenance. And with coins that are that high grade and that special, many times we can trace the ownership all the way back from the present day backwards to the 1870s, 1860s, or sometimes even earlier. Yeah. And so that research has always been exciting and engaging to me, and it's also a way to add value to something. I mean, you know, things are worth what they're worth, but if you can attach an extra story to it, that this is from a famous collection or was illustrated in a famous book, that adds another element of interest for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And also it associates you with the taste of connoisseurs from the past. So if somebody who was famously picky about quality had this in their collection, you know something about the kind of quality we're dealing with. So it's doing all that research, and then it's a matter of writing it up. One year I wrote over 1 million words. Wow. So it's a lot of writing, it's a lot of typing, and you know, it's a lot of making sure you know your stuff.
Yeah. How does somebody get into the position that you're in?
At 22 years old, I started working for what was then Bowers and Morena in Wolfboro, New Hampshire. And the first day I got to work, they put Harry Bass's $10 gold eagle collection on it and said, you know anything about gold coins? Time to learn. And that's it. You just jump in with both feet. And I mean, fortunately, I had been doing this as a young collector, and I'd been working as a numismatic cataloger even in high school for another auction firm. So I had some experience, but it's on-the-job learning. And you learn every time you look at a coin. And that means when you go to auction lot viewing, you look at every coin. When you go to a coin show, you try to look at every coin, and you get to a level of expertise where people trust your eye and trust what you have to say about them.
So I got one last question for you.
Sure.
In your opinion, what's the easiest way for someone to breach into coin collecting?
Apply for a job, send a resume to a big auction house or a big coin dealership. I mean, it's hard to find people who have real expertise, real knowledge, and a real sense of integrity and a willingness to make money and hustle And if you've got the hustle and you've got the interest, you can learn the rest as you go. None of us are born knowing everything about coins. You got to learn on the job. Everybody in this room, every expert in this room, but you got to come with a real curiosity, a real hunger for learning, humility, and knowing that you don't know everything, and then the hustle to go make money. And if you've got all of that, you're going to be a good professional numismatist.
There you go.
Yeah, that's it.
Very well said. Anything else you want to say, mention, or plug before we close it out?
No, man, I'm glad to visit with you and glad to have the opportunity. I appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you very much.